Boys, as we continue towards the very end of this show, kind of cut juxtaposed with the end of the season, does last night's game, and I'm trying not to be like the prisoner of the moment, as Sherrell always cautions me on, but does last night's game change how you see this team's tournament futures, Sean?
I think it does to an extent. In the back of my head, even though the record is much better, I still have that UNC Texas A&M second round game in the back of my mind. In terms of
I was
who,
there live. I don't need you to mention that. Thank you.
but in terms of who this team could get matched up with, but I think if and RJ wasn't RJ yesterday, but if they're getting solid performances from Cormac and Ingram, which I think have been tough to come by together. Once again, not 31, but I think they have shown, and I'll say one of these stats for the two pennies, but between the Tennessee games and Duke games of showing what they can do against top competition. Are they a Houston, UConn, Purdue, which once again I think either all those teams can be beaten. But it definitely maybe raised the ceiling a little bit in my mind. And I think we always talked about Elliot Cadeau and him helping to get to that ceiling, but it's really him combined with Ingram and Ryan in terms of what if they're clicking like they are both offensively and defensively, we could see a long run. But once again, if depending on the matchups, depending on a team getting hot, then there is still that range where there have been teams in the past, especially teams that have lost 2 games, 3 games, 4 games in the ACC that you felt these guys are definitely getting at least to the Elite Eight. But I think this team is extremely fun to watch, and just trying to enjoyed it yesterday, and we'll enjoy it over the next few weeks, however long it goes.
Well, and
Is
I like your hang on, Sherrell. I like your point too, talking about how the matchups might go. When you mentioned shooting, I don't know that it has to come from Ingram or Ryan or Cadeau. Just if they get outside shooting from somebody, just to create that depth offensively, I think it matters. Sherrell, what's up?
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm curious y'all's thoughts. Like, what is the profile of the team? Because I remember doing the podcast. I don't remember who it was with, but we were like, man, if they play Texas A&M, this is 2018, the 2017
Well,
18 season.
so they're playing. It was A&M versus Nevada, and I was like, I don't know who's
Yeah,
going to win that game, but if it's A&M, then UNC is in a lot of trouble. If it's not, they're going to roll Nevada.
Well,
right,
Because
right.
Nevada had a better record coming into that game, if I remember. I feel like they were a favorite in that game, and just nope.
yeah, it was like a 1 to 2 point spread, I think.
Right. But it was like you saw the match. You saw like this is a huge problem for Carolina. Like
I
who
mean,
was that?
same.
Or what is the profile of that team this year? It's like, yeah, this is not good.
Well, I mean, to an extent, same thing. UNC Wisconsin being matched up a few. I think they probably would have fared
Blue Boys
better
last
against
year.
fared better against Baylor if they had made it in
Yeah.
that second round versus Wisconsin, and then you had Marquette 2 years ago. That was a perfect matchup. So who's that team? I mean, I think we just talked about Kentucky in terms of
I
how
think
they
yeah.
can be at the top,
Good
but
Kentucky. Good Kentucky. Yes, I agree
Or or,
wholeheartedly, Sean.
but that
or
goes
even
that goes to the athleticism and the ability to create off the dribble that they had. Bradshaw was still young, so they had that tall, that length. Which once again, you look at Duke. Look at Duke last year. Probably one of the rare times I didn't think UNC was not the better team because they gave up so many games where they were the better team. They just didn't win, but a lot of that was lively combined with UNC not having shooting, so they could just pack the paint because pretty much everybody on Duke is back, right? And their defense was just you felt UNC could get whatever they wanted anytime. So I think it is that length that can bother Armando, as well as that athleticism. So I think it does go to some of those SEC schools that could be issues. But
Alabama, Auburn, those
not Auburn,
types.
but like
Auburn. Okay.
Alabama,
Alabama, maybe. I could
Alabama.
see that because they love to push, and they're one of those teams too where with their
But
tempo, if they hit outside shots, I think that could be a struggle.
I mean, I guess I'm curious. Once again, talk Wisconsin, kind of the slow, methodical. Even Iowa State, which I don't think last year I thought Iowa State they were the tougher team, the more aggressive team, and not that they punked UNC, but they exerted their will on UNC, and I don't see people exerting their will onto UNC unless it is an extreme athleticism advantage.
I think that's safe. Sherrell, I want to ask you something.
I'm curious Sherrell's take on that.
I was going to flip it around on him.
Yeah, I just think before you said Texas A&M, my mind was just like, oh, that was in Charlotte too, and Carolina's going to be in Charlotte. So like, who's the?
All right, y'all got to stop this. Stop this mess.
So who's the super athletic, 7 or 10 seed? If Carolina's a 2, or I guess 8 or 9 if they're a 1, who could, kind of bother Baycott, who has the length on the wing to bother RJ Davis, and then kind of see where things go. And Gonzaga comes to mind because they're playing well recently. They don't have all of those pieces, but I think they have some of them. So there's a few teams, but I think it's more profile than particular teams that I'm thinking about. And maybe there's not a team that has the exact profile for this particular UNC team, because as we said, it is very versatile, much more versatile than the teams of the last 5 years. So maybe it's a situation where they're not as they're more immune to that kind of talent deficiency just because they are so versatile.
Well, they're not as susceptible as like this, the common prototypes of teams that you see out there, which, every year it seems like there's a different style that seems to be, running the tournament or having success. Who knows what that'll be this year? All right, guys, last question. What do you anticipate this week in DC? Sherrell, stay with you.
Oh man. I don't know. This is under Hubert Davis. I think it has a little, that's going to sound bad. Let me rephrase. I think Hubert Davis, winning the tournament is very, very important to him because it reminds him of the Coach Smith days when Carolina won the tournament often. And as weird as it seems, Carolina hasn't won one in 8 years. And the last one, that was in DC. Yeah. And really, since 2000, I think they've only won 3. The back-to-back in 2007 and 8, and then 16. I believe that's correct. So 3 in 24 years for an event that Carolina used to own isn't great. And I think you'll see Hubert Davis play it like the NCAA tournament. I don't think it's going to be a situation where maybe past UNC coaches are like, cool. If they win, great. If not, it's all good. The big one is next week. I think he's going to play it straight. So I don't expect there to be any lull on Thursday at noon. I don't expect the team to come out sleepy at all. I think that's not in this team's DNA. It could just be a bad shooting night, but I think they'll win a game. I really think they'll be in the final on Saturday. Who they play, who knows? But I think they're going to go for it and try to get that double regular season ACC championship going.
I mean, I think you're right. I don't think it's in it. Who knows? I don't think it's in this team's DNA. It's definitely not in this coach's DNA. I think he's like you said.
I didn't answer your question either. Sorry.
You did. You said one game, but then you said you thought they'd make it to the final. That's an answer to me, and since I'm the one that's running the show, I'm going to give you a pass on that, sir. I think that's acceptable. Sean, what's your expectation for the Heels this weekend?
To be honest, I don't really have one, because I think you can look at even the first game they play, whether it is Virginia Tech or Florida State, if not a tournament team in terms of NCAA tournament, and maybe even the semifinal isn't depending on Wake or Pitt, but I think all 4 of those teams could give UNC a game, and then that's even before looking at the finals. So I think I'd agree with Sherrell, at least one, see where things go. I think wouldn't be a surprise if they go and win it. Wouldn't be a surprise if somehow they got upset and maybe that refocuses them on what really matters, the NCAA tournament. But, I think with how they've been playing, makes me wish I still lived in DC and was going to the games. But I think, they should be very competitive and most likely will be getting into that NCAA tournament. And maybe we're talking about regular season and conference tournament championships next Sunday.
Well, shout out to the folks who were in DC with me in 16 when the Tar Heels just absolutely throttled Notre Dame and then beat Virginia to win it that night at Fado was quite fun. All right, guys. Yeah, go ahead.
That is one of my favorite non NCAA tournament games. That final against Virginia, and the funny thing is, we always said, man, that felt like a Final Four game. Like it was intense. It was back and forth. Of course, it was low possessions because it was Virginia. They had a lot of NBA talent then, and Carolina hadn't. They were trying to get over the hump, and they finally did and won it. And just think about it. They were 10 minutes away from having a rematch with them in the Final Four.
Yeah.
But Jim Boeheim decides to go press on UVA, and Carolina ends up, blowing Syracuse out in the Final Four. We know how it ended, but I just always think about that year. That was such a great game, just a wonderful college basketball game in DC that year.
Well, it was a cool environment. It was a high-level game, but the environment was cool because you had both the UVA and UNC fans there. I mean, it was split, and there was also a couple of NC State fans in front of us who were just there to be mad at the world. But there was there was a ton of UNC fans, a ton of UVA fans. And to your point, Sherrell, that was actually a fun UVA team to watch. They were much less, they were still the stall ball teams like Tony Bennett's known for, but they had some players, right? I think Parentes was still on that roster. Justin Anderson might have still been on that roster. Like they